Hello everybody and welcome to the season recap of Building a Nation with Treaty United over in Ireland, which of course you can catch live on Twitch on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays. We're actually live right now, of course, so yeah, join us over there after you've watched this. And of course, drop a like on these videos if you do enjoy them. Lets me know to keep doing them. And if you're interested in the full VODs of these, they're of course available on the second channel, link in the description in their entirety. And sometimes that's not always a good thing. So coming into the start of this season, we found ourselves in a weird position where we're obviously still trying to strengthen our squad, as we had won the league last season at an absolute canter, and we feel like we had that kind of on lock at this point, but we wanted to start making inroads into Europe a little bit more, and we had at least managed to qualify for the Europa League knockouts, which is obviously something we'll talk about in a minute, but we still wanted to make sure that our league form didn't suffer too much, as we were potentially going to go slightly deeper into some European tournaments. So we had to make some signings and get all of that stuff sorted, trying to focus still on under 18 players, or 18 and under essentially. That way they could count as homegrown and we wouldn't have the same kind of problems we've had with European squad registration. And the problems we've had with Treaty being a brand new side as well is that of course no players counted as homegrown technically, because we couldn't produce any players at the very start because we didn't have any. Not that that would have mattered, because obviously as we progressed through, we were still going to shed some players anyway, and the squad was going to look very different. But it's definitely been a work in progress, and it's going to take several years, I think, until that really comes to fruition. But I think the best thing to do would be to start with the youth intake that we had this year. Probably the best prospect in this year's youth intake. Now, unfortunately, once again, we were promised a 5-star golden generation as per, but this time we had high hopes because it had four different slots were considered A. One of them contained 2 players, but unfortunately once it came through, yet again, we were left a little bit disappointed. However, the best of the bunch is this lad, Chris McLean, a central midfielder who, I've got to be honest, he's not bad, really. For 16 years old, he's actually pretty good, has good consistency. He's not awful by any means. He's not getting 5-star players or anything like that, but I definitely feel like he's a player that could no doubt make his way for a top division side in Ireland at some point in his career, but I think there's very little chance that it's going to be with us, and that's a real shame, because we do at some point want to bring through an absolute brilliant homegrown talent that comes through at Treaty and stays his entire career. We want Eric Sandberg of this save is essentially what we're looking for. But yeah, he was very much the best of the bunch. But as for some of the other youngsters, I thought I'd concentrate on a few that have been potentially out on loan this year and show you how they've done at other Irish sides, because we are starting to be able to farm a few of our players out on loan to other Irish sides now. It's slowly building up. It's certainly nowhere near what it could be, but it's going to get there eventually to the time where we'll have like 40 players out on loan. That's how it should look after about 15, 16 seasons of this save. Slow progress though. Gerard Bortwell still smashing it out on loan at Bray Wanderers, who are now our affiliate side. So we do at least have a sort of a baby club in the second tier. Banged another 10 goals for them this year. He's been out on loan there for 3 seasons now, doing some nice bits in the second tier of Ireland. And I think he's a solid player for them. Again, never going to be good enough for us probably, but he's still got fantastic mentals and he's developing quite nicely there. Bradley Saunders is another one. He's out on loan at Drogheda. I think he joined us last season. He's spent some time there on loan, 41 appearances for them now. Not fantastic for them, but he was playing in the top flight this year. Nathan Hosker, our young Englishman, I say young, he's 23 now, has spent the season out on loan at Dundalk. Got 15 starts for them, again playing in the top flight. Dundalk are one of the sides, the first few sides that have really started to take an interest in signing some of our players on loan, and I think that's really helped them out this season. There's also Morgan Matteo, who's been out on loan at Dundalk now for 3 seasons, but he's a really solid right-sided player. I mean, look at some of the physicals on him. The agility on the man is astonishingly good, and has managed to contribute 10 assists and 8 goals to Dundalk's season, playing regularly for them in the top flight of Irish football this season. I think he's one of these players that I could see staying out on loan there as long as we physically can keep him there, to be fair, because I think he's a great player, but he's probably not good enough for us, but he's certainly doing good things for Dundalk. 69 appearances for him too. Nice. Renatas Petkus also out on loan at Dundalk this season. Only 6 starts for him, but 6 goals in total in that period in there too. The Lithuanian international striker, a guy we signed last season on a sort of a whim because we wanted to sign an international. He only joined them midway through the year, but he certainly contributed a few goals to them again. And hopefully if we can keep these guys out on loan as long as possible at these clubs, it could definitely boost them out over the next couple of the seasons and hopefully help a side like Dundalk out in Europe next year. And that's what we really do need. We need that first team to start taking a load of our players on loan, boost their squad up massively, do better in the league, which they definitely have as a result of it, but also start performing better when it comes to the European games, help us out on the coefficients a little bit, because boy do we need the help at the moment. On to the signings, and we've made, I think, from what I remember, a fair few, but there have been some outs this season, and one that I'm not too pleased about. First out, Josh Hines went to Linfield for £40,000. Not a big surprise. Good to get the deal done. Slightly worse news, though, is that Haji Mnoga went to Al Hilal over in the Saudi Arabian League. Nothing we could really do about this. We ended up taking a massive loss on the deal as well, and it wasn't fantastic. Essentially, it's the first time we've had a club come in for one of our players and then basically just try to cause an absolute shitstorm to get their way. But not only that, he refused to even negotiate a sensible transfer fee. So in the end, he ended up leaving for £770,000, which is bad considering how much we paid for him like literally a year earlier, which I admit at the time we paid too much for. But the fact that we were only able to get him to agree to leave, or say agree to sell him for £700,000 was not ideal. But I can see why he wanted to leave though, because he's on nearly 30 grand a week in Saudi Arabia. So I mean, fair play to the guy on that one, I suppose. But it did leave us in a bit of a hole in the right back spot, and also out like nearly £2 million, which is not the sort of situation you want to be in. But there's very very little we could do about it because he was just insistent on it and was causing all sorts of problems. You then get the team leaders complaining about me not letting him go. The best part was as well, of course, when we did sell him, those same team leaders kicked a shit up because we had then sold him after they'd specifically told me to let him leave. Because FM dynamics. More on that in a bit. Believe me. I'll keep it short, though. Don't worry. In even worse news, though, we also lost Alan to Rangers for the season, not for the season, forever, disappointingly. He had a release clause in his contract of 650, roughly, £1,000, and they triggered it. Now, I'd tried several times throughout the season, before the transfer window opened, to negotiate a deal with his agent to get rid of the release clause. However, every time I tried to offer him a new contract, the agent would lock in immediately a lower release clause. So we were unable to do anything about it. And all I could do was offer him a lower release clause and nothing. I couldn't get him to sack his agent because you can't do that unless they come to you. And we were left in an awkward position where eventually it was just triggered by Rangers. Now, thankfully, they actually, which they didn't have to do, offered him back to us on loan for the rest of the season as part of the deal. After the deal, which they really did not need to do. I'm going to try and get him back on loan again next season and see if we can pull off a deal there. Particularly as we weren't even paying his wages for the second half of this year, but it is still disappointing to lose a player for that kind of price when you can see that he's immediately jumped up to being worth £8 million the moment he's joined Rangers. We lost him for 650, but yeah, not a lot we could really do about that either. It's still a profit, obviously, as we sign him for free, but you don't want to lose a player of this quality so easily. But unfortunately, when you're us, our player values just aren't there at the moment because of the Irish leagues. In other news, Eddie Lovett finally left the damn club. He went to Rotherham for £450,000. Now, the weird thing about Eddie is he left and then he came back. Essentially, he complained, told me he wanted to leave. He left the club. 3 days later, I thought I'd jokingly offer him a new contract, and he actually accepted it on weaker terms. So he was back again, and we were able to shift him on for nearly £500,000 in the summer. So I would say there's an element of stonks to that one, because the guy has been nothing but trouble since he joined this club. The man is ridiculous. But that's all of the outs that weren't on loans. You'll see there actually was quite a few this year, but don't worry, we've made up for it with a sizable amount of ins. I think I showed you him in the last episode of this. I'm not entirely sure, but if I didn't, it's Ricardo Franca, who joined us from Basel for £2.5 million. And he actually officially did join us. This year, it's been a struggle for him to really get much football, but he will still be a homegrown player for us at one point or another. He's sort of been kept out of the team at times by the likes of Moses Mayeni, who's featured on the right quite a lot this season, particularly in big games, as well as, of course, Jacob Carno. But he's still found his time when Carno's been injured, and he's still a great player, and I think he's got plenty of room to improve. This year, just the 1 goal and 7 assists, but he's only started 9 games. Has played a lot off the bench for us this year, so I still think there's a lot more to come for Ricardo, and I'm pleased with his work so far, but I do wonder if it's still one of those, like, paying a bit too much for him. But then again, he's not complaining about football because he's only an impact sub, and he's definitely going to get plenty of it next year. And you can see that he is at least going in the right direction with his attributes, and that's really important, particularly that crossing going up, which is nice. The first big deal that we made in the summer was Juan Pablo Chavera, a Colombian centre-back at the time. Anyway, now we needed to make this deal because we felt like he was a fantastic option as a player to be only 18, to be that good, and he was a South American that was willing to talk to us, which was very, very important indeed. But upon looking at his attributes, we were like, what on earth are we actually going to do with this guy? Because he came in and he could only really play centre-back and left-back into the way that he can. Ignore the central midfield thing right now. And we just took a look and thought, there's no way that this guy could really be that flourishing of a centre-back in our side. Given the lack of heading ability, the lack of jumping reach, the lack of height, his aggression isn't fantastic either, but he did have a lot of the good attributes that we could potentially make him a ball-winning midfielder in the centre of midfield, which is exactly what we did. So we retrained him over the course of about 6 months to play, that's a box-to-box map, to play as a ball-winning midfielder on defend. And you can certainly see now that I've highlighted the attributes why we wanted to retrain him in that role. And I think that allowed him to take a little dip at first, but he's definitely started to nail down that spot this season. And from the age of 18 now to 19, he's played 44 matches for us this season across all competitions. And that, to me, is a sign that we've actually got a really good player in this guy, and we only paid £375,000 from La Equidad over in Colombia to bring him in. So I think really strong piece of business for us. I like him a lot. Good consistency. Really just a really solid player in this team, and I hope he can go far with us, particularly as he can cover centre-back and left-back if we need him to. Next up was a slightly bigger outlay. This was essentially our replacement for Haji Mnoga. Now, obviously, he's 18 years old, so he's got a long way to improve and has a lot of work to do in his career. This is Sinisa Stojinovic. We signed him from Red Star for a deal of 700, rising to, I believe, £900,000. And I think he's a solid player. Good tackling to start with. His positioning's decent. Marking isn't fantastic. I agree. Reasonable physicals, and he's got a bit of height about him, some reasonable mentals. Crossing and dribbling at 8 are okay. He's only 18, remember, so a long way to go for this guy. But he's still managed to find 13 starts for us this year. Some substitute appearances. He has scored a goal, got himself an assist in that period too. So I think he's a solid player for us. And he's already getting games in the first team at 18 years old. So I think there's definitely something to this guy, and hopefully he can continue to improve. And I think it's a much better deal than Hajim Noga. We essentially turned the money around and just dumped it straight into someone new. And in that same breath, we also picked up Petar Lucian Spalo from Dinamo Zagreb for £475,000. And again, it was one of these signings that was almost too good to ignore. Now, I know he's injury prone again, slight consistency issues, but again, we're Treaty United. We can't afford to be picky. But I think he's one of those players that we could most definitely get out on loan to someone. Hopefully he's wanted by someone for loan potentially. Yes, in fact, he's wanted by Scamrock Rovers for a loan. So maybe that's actually something we could potentially do next season. Get this guy out on loan to another Irish side, even if it is them. Hopefully it won't be, but it possibly could be. I mean, they may need him because if they're going to be in the Europa Conference League potentially next year through their cup win, then maybe there's hope for him there. But yes, I think he's a solid option. And for 475k, again, I think it's a reasonable deal. Player for the future, another homegrown prospect. This is kind of the players we're just harvesting at the moment when we can find them. I also picked up Tom Sawyer on a free transfer from Everton, partly because of his name, just because I thought it was funny, but also he was actually English at the time. And then the moment he joined us, his nationality just became Irish. So that's good. And again, it's a free transfer. He's on a bit more money than I would like, and I might try and move him on honestly, because I think he's taking up a bit too much of the wage bill, considering he only played 2 games this year, and I was getting a bit desperate at the time. So yeah, he probably won't be with us for too long. But I also picked up Graham Trewick on a free transfer from Newcastle. He was released, and I just kind of liked the cut of his jib, so to speak. And we were able to get him fairly cheap on the free transfer and with the fairly low wages too. And he has started 9 games for us this season, scored a goal, got an assist. We're still really looking for that standout centre-back signing that we've yet to be able to find really since Pereira left. And I think we've kind of suffered as a result of that slight dip in defensive quality that we've had this season, because we haven't been able to partner Rakov. It's been mostly Rakov and Lesteban this season in the defence, but I just feel like we need that one star, absolute stonking star of a centre-back that could really revolutionise that area of the team. Just haven't been able to find him yet, really. One of our best signings of the season, though, for me, is Jordan Millwood. Yes, that's right, we found Millie, and he was actually good. He was released by Shrewsbury in the summer, and we thought, you know what, we're going to take a risk on him and pick him up. He's on quite a large amount of money, but he's got a low squad status, and he has been sensational this season. And I think part of the reason is those pros, the big matches, the consistency. He has a lot of good things in his direction, except for his finishing ability, and it has made exactly no difference this year. 28 starts, 15 goals, and 13 assists for us this season, including 8 goals in the Champions League for Millie, which is utterly mad to get that many goals. And he scored some vital goals for us this season in all competitions and has been fantastic. He missed the last few games of the year through an injury, but still, picking him up on a free transfer, I think has been probably one of our signings of the season, particularly with Carlo Moura having a dreadful year and being nothing but trouble for us. Having Millie here has made a huge difference to us, and he's really he's lit up the league and lit up the whole sort of season. He's only actually started 10 league games this year, but has got a goal contribution in every single one of them so far, which is really saying something. And yeah, the man is just a great player, so really happy to bring Millie in. And the last signing we made was another Serbian, and this is of course maybe a player I'm looking at for the future in the centre-back situation here. This is Sinisa Mihailovic, yeah, imagine that. Sinisa Milosevic, who's coming from Red Star for I think £700,000 as well, with a little bit of clause on the end of it. I don't know if he's going to be perfect. His heading is still a little bit on the sussy side, so we're definitely going to have to get him to work on that. And I think we actually are. I think he is technically working on his aerials, but he's fairly strong and very strong on both feet, essentially, which I think makes a big difference. And again, one for the future, one who's going to be another homegrown player, and I think there's a real player under here. Maybe he could be the guy that could grow in to that ridiculous centre-back. Again, only 13 starts this year. He's not been a starter in this team, but he's played enough for me to want to keep him around and certainly not loan him out to any other sides. And I think there's a good player in here. We just need to unlock him. And that actually concludes our transfer business for this season. So the squad's going to look fairly similar in many ways, but with just little players slotting in here and there. So I guess what you're thinking is now, how did the league go then, since you were so dominant before? Well, it actually started fairly well. Winning the President's Cup final, which was very nice in there as well. Won our first game of the year, but then we did lose away at Shelbourne and got off to a bit of a rocky start. Some wins in there too, but dropping points at Galway, dropping more points at Sligo Rovers. We also had ourselves in a situation with quite a few games in hand on account of the European fixture, of course, that we had still coming up in the Europa League. Just going to add goal scorers in so you can see in the actual league matches and who was actually scoring in those games. Obviously, ignore the ones from the friendlies. Just hide those, actually. But as you can see, it was a relatively strong start to the season, but we weren't doing as great, certainly, as we were in the previous years. But Emmett Doran was still scoring a few goals in there. Moses Mayeni. The standard lot were basically putting the goals where we needed them to, but it wasn't fantastic. We were still doing okay and keeping ourselves right towards the top, but we did lose in a 4-3 game against Derry City in there too. Some relatively poor performances, particularly in this game, given that we were actually 3-1 up in this game with 15 minutes to go, but Tol Bork and Zach O'Hare's goal turned it on its head for us, but we got a little bit of a run going after that. 5 consecutive league wins there, dropped a few points, beat UCC 8-1 in the cup with Cenk Bayrak. I think he scored 6 in this game, or is it 5? He scored a decent amount, did the young German, trying to give him some football in there as well, which has been relatively good. Again, you can see we were relatively solid throughout the year. Got a few lucky cup draws this year, got to play a few non-league sides in there, which allowed us to rotate the squad around a little bit, get some extra players, some football that maybe we wouldn't have done otherwise. But then a defeat against Bohemian, a relatively poor one again there, but turned it around with a couple of 5-goal games as well, just to really put the goals down to team. But again, drew with Sligo in the cup semi-final, which was very, very disappointing in there too. Booty and Kano getting the goals, and they had a red card, and believe me, this came back to bite us. Lost to Derry City again in the next game with an early red card. Ryan Cassidy scoring for them as well. We then had back-to-back matches against Dundalk, which was stupidly important. A 3-0 victory and then a 1-1 draw away from home. Basically was these games that won us the title in the end. Those back-to-back matches against Dundalk, we had games in hand on them, but they could have easily wiped out our advantage by, of course, beating us in these matches. We then got ourselves a 3-2 against Drogheda. Lost to Skamrock Rovers, of course we did, because that's just what we do, but we managed to get a 3-0 victory over Galway United, and then, of course, lost in the second leg of our replay against Sligo Rovers, very, very annoyingly, which meant that, of course, it was them versus Skamrock Rovers in the final, and I believe Skamrock Rovers won it, which means they get Europe now at someone else's expense, disappointingly. We then beat Linfield 2-0 and 2-0 in the Irish President's Cup final, the Irish Champions Cup final, in order to win that. But I will be coming back to this. You'll see Jacob Kano got a red card in the second leg of that. Disappointing, but it was our final match of the season. Didn't really matter, except it turned out that it did. But we'll talk about that in a bit. As for the league itself, we ended up winning it by 13 points. Certainly nowhere near as dominant as we have been in previous seasons. That is taking that for absolute for sure. You can see, though, Derry City were 8th in the league with 47 points to come 8th. That's nuts. They were 12 points off of 3rd spot and 25 points clear of 9th place Galway United, who did actually get relegated through the playoffs as well, losing to Waterford. So Waterford will be up in the top flight next year, along with Finn Harps. Halcroft, top assister in the league with 10. Sharif in there with 9. Mayeni was actually the top scorer for us in the league with 17. Dorian just didn't get enough opportunities in the league. I say an opportunity. Now it's probably time to talk about the whole Emmett Doran situation, I suspect. So basically, we ran into a slight problem this year with Emmett Doran in that we had to give him a new contract because we wanted to time down. The only way we could get him to agree a new deal was on a star player contract. But we figured that's fine. He's our star player. He's going to play virtually every game possible. So that's fine. We'll actually be able to award him that kind of football. Except that's not how it works at all. Because what actually happened is I got a random news article that said Emmett Doran concerned about playing time. And I'm just like, how could you possibly be concerned about playing time? You're our star striker who plays every chance I can possibly put you in the team. So it turned out that I'd obviously been resting him in a league match prior to our midweek Champions League qualifiers, which is what you would do because, it's quite important to not have an absolutely knackered player for those games when we desperately needed him. But apparently, you're not allowed to rest anybody with star player. You cannot rest them. Not once. Not allowed to whatsoever. So basically, he complained about it. I said, that's fine. I'll make it right. I'll promise that you can play more than you already do, which is kind of nuts, but that's your problem, mate. And then he said, too many promises under the bridge, even though I'd never made him a promise since he joined the club. And then he told me that he wanted to leave. So that was good. Real GG. I guess you could call it... It's dynamic. Still, very irritating. And you might say, well, you just have to tell him that you're going to rest him before matches because the game doesn't know why you're resting him, why he's not playing. They'll just consider him being dropped. Fair answer. Doesn't work either. We tried this several times. One time we did manage to get it to work where we asked him to be rested and he said yes. But every other time we tried to rest him when he was dead knackered before an important match. We've got a meaningless cup tie against the non-league side versus Champions League match in a couple of days. We tried to rest him for it and he would say no. And I'm offended that you'd even ask. And I'd say sure. But at least you're not going to play the full 90 minutes, right? And he'd be like, no, I can't believe you'd even ask. I'm just like, what is the point? So, yeah, we've had massive issues with him, and we essentially ended up having to start him for 2 minutes and then bring him off the bench, substitute him straight away, just to try and appease him. And apparently that doesn't even work either, because it still kept dropping his playing time to regular starter, even if he was starting every match. So that was kind of disappointing, and something that's definitely for me taken a huge step backwards in FM this year is the player dynamics. They are utterly broken a lot of the time, and not just him. There's been several other situations of this stuff where players are on a certain contract with a certain playing time expectation, and you'll go into their playing time expectations and it's higher than the one in their contract, even though that's the reason the contract exists. And then they get upset when you don't give them their expectations, even though that's not what their contract says. But that's just one of those things. It's particularly bad with fringe players. They all have regular starter expectations, even though they're a fringe player. But disappointing, but we'll have to deal with that. He is still here though, that's the main thing. We didn't throw our toys out the pram. We just needed to make sure that he was happy, I suppose, and we did eventually manage to make him happy, but it's an absolute fine line trying to keep that. So never again will I be giving a player a star player contract. And the only other trouble we've had this year really was the Regan Booty situation. I wanted to give him a new contract, but same kind of problems. Not really. His agent is insisting, I should be able to show you now actually. Basically, every time we try to offer him a contract, his agent locks in midfielder with deep line playmaker role, and I'm not going to give him this contract because we've never used a deep line playmaker, and he's been here 8 years. So yeah, and we can't ask him to sack his agent because again, you can't unless they come to you. So we're just kind of stuck with having to let him go because I don't want to have another player that's just going to complain the moment we don't play him in the role that we don't even use. And at no point this year have we managed to get rid of this. It just appears immediately, and there's just nothing we can do about it. So we might lose Regan Booty because his agent's a mug. Worst case scenario though, we might be able to let him go and bring him straight back, but I'd rather not. In case you were wondering about the second tier, you'll notice that once again Cork City bottled it. One of these days they are going to get themselves promoted. I beg of them. I just want to see them back in the top flight because they've got some great youngsters, and I think they could actually be a genuine team if they just kept themselves up for a season, but that doesn't look likely at the moment. Now, on to Europe, and this is where things get very interesting. We drew against Siska in the first round of the Europa League knockouts, and we actually managed to beat them at home, which was spectacular, and then went away from home and got a 2-2 draw there with an own goal by Mucklin in the 103rd minute that was allowing us to sneak through to the second round of the Europa League knockouts. And Emmett Doran, of course, scored in the first leg, which was sensational. Then things took a different turn, though, as we played against Bayer Leverkusen. We didn't expect anything from this draw, and yet somehow it happened. A 4-2 victory in Ireland with Emmett Doran scoring all 4 of the goals. They did get a couple of goals back in this one, but it was ridiculous. The performance levels were absurd. And then we went to Germany and won as well, with once again Emmett Doran scoring a hat-trick. He scored 7 times against them in 2 games. Every goal we scored in that tie was scored by Emmett Doran. 7 goals in a single tie. It was insane. There's a reason they call him ED7 and he wears the number 7 shirt, and it's for things like this. Sadly though, in the next round we were drawn away at Leicester City, and we actually played spectacularly well in this first game. I'll just show you. I think we were so hard done by to lose this by 4-2. We came here and played brilliantly. Emmett Doran put us in front on 25 minutes in this game, and I thought, oh my god, it's happening again, as of course he'd scored yet another brace. But as you can see, Leicester managed to find some chances and are just able to put us away, sadly, by 4-2. Harsh. I think we were very good. But then unfortunately in the return leg, Emmett Doran's goal once again gave us the lead in this tie before Leicester City turned it around. We just couldn't play quite as well. But you might notice again that Emmett Doran scored 10 goals in 4 Europa League games in a row, basically. He scored every goal for us in 4 consecutive matches just to try to keep ploughing us forward. But still, getting to the quarterfinal of the Europa League this season, considering we'd already got hammered by Leicester earlier this year, comfortably, we were making big strides in the right directions. And to get that far in did leave us with a lot of games in hand in the league, and you can now sort of see why we were starting to struggle a little bit around this period, because we had all these extra fixtures. But it's good for coefficient, it's good for money, and of course it's good for rep as well. Now, Champions League qualifying. We got going with a relatively easy draw initially. I mean, we actually only won 3-2 here against Dinamo Tbilisi, which it should have been much more comfortable than it was, but there you go. And then we actually went to Georgia and won 1-0 with, of course, Emmett Doran scoring again, because that's what he does. Doran actually did win the top scorer in the Europa League. No surprises there. He got 20 goals in a single season in the Europa League, which is mad. He also was technically the top scorer in the Champions League in the same season, but it doesn't count because some of it was scored in the qualifiers. But he actually outscored Erling Haaland as well. Haaland got it with 12, and Doran had got 13 in the Championship as well. So he scored 33 goals in Europe in a single season, which is astonishingly good. In the next round, though, we got drawn against Breidablik, won 6-0 away from home. You could see that Doran did Doran things again, netting another 4 goals on that particular one. And then in the home game, things got even better for us as we won by 8-0, and Doran scored a hat-trick. Millie also got a brace in there too with Howcroft and Mayeni. 14-0 on aggregate. That's a bit more like it for us. Then in the next round, in the third qualifying round, we drew against Malmö, and we managed to get a 1-1 draw. We were losing for most of the game whilst battering them, but then in the 86th minute, Millie pulled out a cracking goal to get us the equaliser, and we then went to Sweden and played brilliantly. 2 more goals from Millie. I told you he scored some important ones. 1 from Emmett Doran allowed us to get a, 4-3 victory over Malmö to get to that final qualifying round of the Champions League, where ironically, we actually got an easier draw than we had in the previous round. We went away to Ludogorets of Bulgaria and won by 4-0 with Doran, Mayeni, Remy and Rakov scoring the goals, pretty much wrapping the tie up and allowing us Champions League group stages for the second time in the save without much thought. But we did still put it to bed in the second leg with 2 more goals from Emmett Doran. What a man he is, honestly. When he's not complaining, and I don't really blame him, I blame the game. He's an astonishing striker. But that, of course, meant we got Champions League group stages, all the money that comes with it, which is what we're going to be doing right now over on stream, spending that money. Our budget is £12.5 million. Hopefully we can actually sign some with it this time. But that left us with the group stages. But our group was a group of death. We were still pot 4, just barely, but still pot 4. Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, and RB Leipzig. Not an easy group by any means. But we went to Germany and got our first ever point in the Champions League. Nutty stuff. Once again, Millie with a brace in this game. We came from behind Well, we were 2-0 down and came back in, well, first half stoppage time and then right at the start of the second half to earn our first ever point. And we were very good in that game. And that gave us nearly 800 grand just for the point. As we then welcomed Barcelona to Thomond Park and only lost by 2-1. We lasted until the 33rd minute where Trincao scored, I think it was from a corner or something like that. Oh no, it was Pedri's goal was from a corner. But then Connor Coventry actually got one back for us. And we didn't look completely abject in this match. They were still the better side by a comfortable distance, but we lost 6-0 home and away to Barcelona last time we were in a Champions League group. So to only lose 2-1, we felt like we were making progress. And it did also help that RB Leipzig were getting smacked about by Barcelona and PSG. We then travelled to the Parc des Princes, got a red card in this game and 2 Erling Haaland goals. One was a free kick as well. Gave PSG a 2-0 victory, but yet again, it wasn't being like embarrassed by teams. And that was the key for us, just not to get smashed. Unfortunately, that did kind of happen when we welcomed PSG to the home match. Luckily, Barcelona were busy smacking RB Leipzig about as well in the other match. We fell 5-0 down in this game. The penalty was absolute nonsense. It was a shirt pull. We got given a penalty against us for a shirt pull from open play, where the player that pulled the shirt was maybe 10 yards away from the guy that actually fell and was given the penalty for. But there you go. We ended up losing 5-2. But Emmett Doran still scored a couple of goals in this one against Barcelona. One was a brilliant volley as well. And we were just trying to keep our goal difference down, given that Leipzig and ours were level pegging. And the best thing was, when we came to play Leipzig at home, we know that we needed a draw pretty much because of how things go. But we went behind from Florian Grilic early on. But then Connor Coventry, with his second Champions League goal of the season, an absolute thunderbolt, gave us the 1-1 draw in the end. It wasn't a win that we needed, but it meant that as long as we didn't lose, as long as we basically outplayed them on the final day of the season, we would still get third place. And yes, we did lose 3-0 away to Barcelona in the Camp Nou on the final day with Fatih Zagaritz and Emiliano Buendia scoring the goals against us very early in this game. But we still put up a decent fight, had some chances in the second half. But the key thing was Leipzig lost as well. And that's why the group looks like this. Despite us only having 2 points on the board, we did get third in the group on account of our goal difference, basically. Because obviously the head-to-heads were both drawn because we drew both legs and it doesn't count the away goals in there or whatever. So nevertheless, it went to league goal difference and we had a better one. Only conceded 15 compared to the 27 of last time. But we managed to get third place with only 2 points, which put us in the Europa League for after Christmas. So we did what we really... the best case scenario was get third and get Europa League, and we actually pulled it off and gained another like £1.6 million just from the draws. And the best thing is, our draw after Christmas, first round of the Europa League knockouts, is against PAOK. We got a Greek side in the first round of the knockouts, and there's some good ties in there too that could potentially give us a plum draw in the second round should we progress. I think quarterfinals in the Europa League is very much on the cards for a second straight season, and that to me is a real sign of things to come for us. Not being quite so embarrassed in the Champions League this year is one thing, but also making deeper inroads into the other tournaments is definite steps in the right direction, you know? Now, budget-wise, we've got 18 million in the bank, which is bloody lovely, and a transfer budget of 12 million. And you can see that we've also got 55 million in wages. Given that our highest paid player is on 7k a week, you could see what's available for us in the window, and that's what we're currently dealing with over on stream right now. Probably not signing anybody, let's face it. It's probably going to be mostly scouting, but that's really the fun part for me, is getting that scouting stuff done and finding those next gems for the future. Because I think we've got enough on our shortlist that we could actually pick up a few players, though. And that's going to be a rarity, me signing players on a transfer stream. I know. Probably get the tie against PAOK done today as well, actually, in there too, so stay tuned. As for the other Irish sides in Europe, though, it's been a tough year for them. They all, of course, come in at the second qualifying round and got handed some absolutely woeful draws. St. Pat's, though, you'll see, got Molfehovar and were actually able to get through 4-1 on aggregate, which was excellent news. However, the others could not really be said the same for, as Dundalk went out, but they did at least manage to win a game against Białystok of Poland, but out straight away was disappointing for them. And Derry City were comfortably beaten 6-1 on aggregate by Dunajska Streda of Slovakia as well. So we lost 2 of them in the very first round, and this is something that's going to have to change, but it always takes so much time for that side of things to really change, and we have to be aware of that, because sadly it was in the third qualifying round that the journey from St. Pat's came to an end. They lost on penalties to IFK Göteborg of Sweden. They very nearly got themselves into the playoff round, which would have been really something for them, and it was just so close. Now, coefficient wise this year, it's not been the best season for us so far. 4.25 points, which is less than last season. However, I do still think we can gain more this year as a result of the fact that we're still in Europe. And remember, we're losing that 6.875 season, and that's the real downside to us. We had a really good year that year, and not just us, but the other Irish sides did pretty good that season too. But once that's gone, we will actually have a relatively weak... There's a couple of weaker seasons in there too, and I think we're starting to build a bit of momentum now, where having 5-point years for us is actually considered pretty much the norm now. And if we could have some really good runs in Europe, perhaps, go a little bit deeper, start getting some 6-point seasons, and maybe just have a couple of years where the other Irish sides just get through a few more rounds together, And it can do. It just relies on the draw and maybe Dundalk having some slightly better players. I think we're not that far away from having maybe like a random 8-point season out of nowhere that could bump us right up the rankings, like a massive amount. Because if you actually look at what we're going to have next year, we are going to lose points. That's almost a given, I would say, unless we win the Europa League. But we're actually not going to drop by very much. We're only going to lose a single spot to Slovakia, who've had a bloody fantastic season. And I think it's still going to give us plenty of room for growth. So we're not going to lose too much. And the teams around us, of course, you could see are dropping off some quite big seasons as well. So it's certainly not the end of the world. We just need to build that consistency and start getting into the 30s overall and start getting those extra spots in Europe. And I think that's where things really do start to change. But it can still be a downside because the more teams in Europe, the more it has to divide it. So I want to have a couple of really good seasons before that happens. And we're going to need them in order to get that anyway. But at least we're leading the charge this year and looking far more capable in Europe. It's still, I'd say, going to be another 4 or 5 years until we can really start to see that progress. But baby steps, eh? That's how it's always been. And that kind of concludes things for us, really, at this point. We've got a lot of plans to do, mate, which we're no doubt making over on stream right now. We've got the Europa League tie to happen. Hopefully Emmett Doran's still here, and hopefully we haven't lost anyone mad during that period. That would kind of suck. I'd like to think that we're going to be on the hunt for that one standout centre-back that we can really carry us through the following season. Bring a couple of players back on loan, like Alan, if we can do, and really try to build this squad out. But we're really stacked in certain areas, and other areas just need a little bit of work, particularly some of those centre-back zones. Not looking at a new goalkeeper anytime soon, because Bart is still pulling off save after save in games, and against that PSG game where we only lost 2-0, I think they had an XG of nearly 5, and Bart was just saving everything. What a god he has been. And that pretty much, that one performance, if we'd conceded 5 or 6 goals, probably would have cost us a third spot in the Champions League group. So he really has done miracles for us at times this season. So it's been very exciting. So yes, that concludes Season 8 of the wrap-up for Building a Nation. If you want to join us, of course, over on stream right now, that's where we are, doing some transfers and stuff, and probably playing some Europa League rounds as well, because why the hell not, eh? So yeah, if you've enjoyed it, drop a like. That'd be lovely. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. That'd be gorgeous too. I stream on Twitch. Obviously, we already talked about that. And I'll see you guys very, very soon. Hold your gun. Capybara. Bye-bye.